crafty friends, it's Donna here, and I've got the cutest little kangaroo Christmas card for you today. You can find my cards on my blog and on YouTube under Donna is Playing Paper, and also on Instagram as DonnaDoll74. Let's get started. This stamp is called Kangaroo Christmas Surprise, and I'm going to use both the image and also the sentiment for my card today. I'm laying them out on some Bristol Smooth paper. I've chosen Bristol Smooth both because it's very flat and even, so it will stamp well, and I'm stamping here with VersaFine Onyx Black ink, which won't run with watercolor mediums. The other reason I've chosen the Bristol Smooth paper is that it will also work well with watercolors, including these Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers that I'm using today. There are lots of different markers on the market, and I'll link to a couple in the description box below. I'm going for a traditional Christmas colour palette today with red and green and some yellow, as well as a brown for my kangaroos. And I'm going to add a few colours here and there to supplement that as I need. It's been ages since I used these markers, and I've forgotten how quick and easy they are. But I've also forgotten that while I usually start with the easiest parts of the image, with watercolors it's probably a good idea to leave small dark areas to the end because I can color them over the top and not worry about smudging that ink. So do as I say and not as I do in this case. Straight away I'm bringing in an extra green just so that I can have some shadows. The great thing about watercolors is that you can blend them out with water to get different shades of the same color. The more you blend, the lighter it gets. But with these brush markers, another thing that you can do is just blend the colors directly because basically they're color and water. And I'm using a mix of those two techniques today. Sometimes I'll lay down some color and blend it out with water. Sometimes I'll use two different colors and blend them together just using the markers. You can also go back over the top with the marker once you've blended it out. The only thing that you need to be careful of is that if there is more water on your page than there is in the tip of the marker, then it's actually going to suck the water up rather than lay the colour down. So just don't colour on anything that's too wet. I've been loving these little cuties that I've been colouring a lot lately. They're a collaboration between Paper Rose Studio and Rachel Ann Miller of Ram Stamps, and they're just adorable and really nice to colour. Many of you will be Australian, but I thought I'd talk a little bit about some Australian animals while we colour, because I think we have animals that are equally as famous as each other and yet very, very different in number. I often have friends say to me, oh, I'd like to see a kangaroo and a koala and, a wombat or whatever else, but especially kangaroos and koalas. And I can say to those friends that I can pretty much guarantee that I can get them a photo of a kangaroo in the wild while they're with me. But a koala is a completely different thing. Kangaroos live in large flocks, they're all over Australia, they're not very shy, they're often out in the day, and we just have a lot of them. Koalas live mostly in trees, and so they're much harder to spot, and they sleep about 20 hours a day, so they don't move much. But even more than that, there are just fewer of them. Last year in 2022, they've actually been declared an endangered species in Queensland, New South Wales, and the Australian Capital Territory. Here in Victoria, where I live, they're not declared as endangered, but it's still very, very rare. In my whole life, I've seen a koala in the wild about 5 times. And it always makes me cry because it's such a special occasion. I'll get back to the animals in a minute. I've left this footage on widescreen today so that you can see the way that I'm loading my brush to spread that colour from the watercolour marker. I'm picking up some water but then wiping most of that off, especially from the base of the bristles, so that I have a lot of control and so that the colour doesn't run everywhere. Also, I'm going back and washing out my brush a couple of times for each colour, so that I can spread that colour from deep to medium, and then wash my brush and spread it again from medium to light. For the leaves of this holly, and so I chose a lime green, thinking that would stand out enough against the bright green on the Christmas present. And once I coloured it, you could definitely see the difference, but I decided to go back over the top with the yellow that I'd used earlier, just to really brighten it up and make it even more different. Watercolours layer beautifully, and you can just see each colour underneath the one that you put on top. Back to our kangaroo. I've got quite a dark brown here, and I don't want the kangaroos to be too dark, so I'm just putting in a little touch of colour in a few areas that I think will be the shaded areas, and I'm going to spread that right out. I grew up in Western Australia, and we have a lot of kangaroos over there. They're certainly something you need to be very careful of while you're driving, but not a lot of the other animals that Australia is famous for. We have quokkas on Rottnest Island, and they're very cute, although probably rather too tame for their own good these days, as they're very reliant on people for their food. But when we moved to Victoria about 20 years ago, I was so surprised to find an echidna walking up our street, and to find wombats in the wild, and all of these other animals that I'd only really heard of in storybooks, even though they were animals from my own country. And the one that surprised me the most was the wombat. If you're from overseas and you've never heard of a wombat, go and Google a picture of one and imagine in your head how big you think they are. Pause the video if you don't want a spoiler straight away. In my mind, wombats were very, very cute. I'd seen them in storybooks, and they just seemed adorable to me. So imagine my surprise the first time I saw a real-life wombat, and it was about 30 kilos. Probably around 60 pounds or something like that, if you're in a country that uses pounds. They're enormous, they really are. During lockdown, we actually lived in a house that had a wombat living underneath it, which sounds very romantic, but it's actually kind of annoying because they dig a lot. And the other amazing thing about wombats is that their poo is kind of square. They lay these kind of square pellets. If you want to check that out, you can Google wombat cubic scat. That's the official name for it. In the places where I want a lighter colour, I'm just scribbling a little bit of that marker on the side and picking it up with my brush like I would any other watercolour paint. I've decided I'm going to add a little bit of shimmer to this card. And to do that, I'm colouring in some light blue and then adding some liquid sparkle to my brush, which is going to add some shimmer as well as spreading the colour. I'll add that to the tissue paper and the pom-pom and the trim on the kangaroo's hat. I can go back and add this in a few layers if I want to. Once that's done, this image is pretty much coloured. I went back and did a little bit of touching up a few areas that I wanted a little bit darker. I also realised that there was another little holly sprig on my sentiment, and so I've coloured that as well. I don't know if it's been bugging you as well, but despite my careful attempts using the packaging to line the box up straight, I actually stamped the sentiment slightly crooked. And so I'm going to fix that by using a stitched rectangle die and cutting that parallel with the sentiment so that the whole image looks straight on the card. Finally, I'm just using a pencil laid on its side to add a little bit of a shadow to ground the image. That's all for today's cards. Feel free to like and subscribe if you wish to, and I'll be back soon with more cards. Bye for now.